I'm going to keep this math mini short and sweet by primarily focusing on the pacing guide. So, for fourth grade, Unit 3, Ancient Number Systems, it really looks very similar to last year. It has three different topics. Topic A, which has these three standards that are all about place value. Topic B, which is just one standard, but it's a big standard because it's adding and subtracting multi digit numbers. And topic C, which is still about place value, but it's thinking about place value of numbers less than one. So we're really getting into decimals. And if you're new to fourth grade, you might not be aware that fourth grade is the first time that students are seeing decimals. They don't operate with decimals until fifth grade, but this is really our opportunity to build that understanding of what decimals are, how we represent them, and to make those connections to place value that we were exploring with larger numbers in topic A. If we scroll down in our pacing guide, of course, don't forget the alignment document. We find that to be very helpful for planning. It helps you see how the different parts of the lesson flow and build. We have our summaries of our topics, and then we get to our manipulatives. In each of the different topics, there's foam dice and cards, and those could be helpful for games and fluency. But the main manipulative that you'll want to be using in this unit are these base 10 blocks, which you should have received this year. Unit 3 starts in mid November. It's kind of awkward because we're spreading it out with report card conferences and with the holiday. But basically, you are spending the rest of November and the very beginning of December focusing on place value. Keep in mind, place value means a lot more than just naming places, it's understanding how places are related. We think about that especially on day 5 and day 6. How are the different values related to each other? We're looking for patterns, we're comparing numbers, and we're rounding numbers. And big push when you're rounding is to use those number lines because the number lines help us to understand why we round the way we do. We can see that a number is truly closer to the number on the left or the right of it rather than just using a trick like, I don't know, what to the floor, to the sky, whatever that trick is. I don't remember it because it's just a trick. We want to use number lines to make sense. All right, so we're into the beginning of December, and it's time to switch to topic B, where we're going to talk about adding and subtracting. The way we've laid this out is that you have time to focus on strategies based on place value before you get into the standard algorithm. The standard algorithm is technically what you are responsible for in fourth grade. But because we know that students may have some unfinished learning, we built in these 4 days for you to establish a deeper conceptual understanding using strategies from third grade. When I talk about strategies from third grade, I'm thinking back, I want to go to this one, to things like using concrete place value blocks or drawings to add numbers, or using expanded form to add numbers, or partial sums to add numbers. And the same strategies work for subtraction. So we have the pacing guide laid out so you can focus on those strategies first. 2 days for addition, 2 days for subtraction. Before you then have 2 days to add with a standard algorithm and 2 days to subtract with a standard algorithm. If you want to mix this up and do all 4 of your addition days first and all 4 of your subtraction days second, that's up to you. But big picture, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days to work on addition and subtraction, plus a flex day and a performance task. That performance task should address content from topics A and B. Then we get into topic C. And I realize this is straddled kind of awkwardly around the holiday. So we really started off with that basic foundational understanding where you are representing numbers before the break. And we're not getting into those more complicated things until after, where you're comparing numbers, you're generating equivalent fractions, you're representing fractions. If you're a little bit behind and you start this day 21 lesson when you come back in January, that's totally fine. That might be a really nice way to space it out, actually. But big picture, you want to be wrapping up Unit 3 by around mid January. We have a flex day in there, and then you can start your Unit 4 pre assessment mid January as you head into Unit 4. Oops, I keep going to that wrong one. One other thing I want to remind you for topic B, in addition to those 3 strategies, is the strategy of number lines. Number lines for addition and subtraction are so helpful because they help students to really think about how it's good for them to break up numbers. Here you see multiple different ways that we could be adding numbers using number lines. Subtracting on number lines is also really helpful, especially because it allows us to understand subtraction in a deeper way. Subtraction doesn't always mean take away, it could mean the difference between two numbers. It could mean when I count up from 278, how many does it take to get me to 546? Number lines can help us be really flexible. Another thing I want to point out content-wise is the use of the place value blocks. We want to use them as flexibly as possible. So, kind of the classic way to represent the number 1,234 would be with the blocks like this. But that's not literally the only way I could represent that number. Instead of having 200s, I could have 10 tens plus the 3 extra tens. So just thinking about the different equivalent ways to represent numbers and asking students, how are they the same? How are they different? How are they equivalent? That could be really important. Another thing to think about with place value blocks is how the same blocks can be used to represent different numbers. So if you ignore the right and you just look at the left, this is kind of the classic way that we've used these blocks. These are our hundreds, these are our tens, these are our ones. But that's not the only way we can use them. What's important about place value is how numbers are related. These orange blocks are 10 times the value of these blue blocks, which are 10 times the value of these yellow blocks. So up here, this is a 1, a 10, and a 100. But over here, I'm still representing my number. It's just that my unit has changed. Now, these orange blocks are worth 1. 1, 2, 3. These blue blocks are worth a tenth. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10. And my yellow blocks are worth a hundredth. 1/100th, 2/100ths. I multiply the value times 10 as I go up those different blocks. So just think about how the same block can represent different values. What's important is not to say, oh, this is 100, but to say, this represents 100 because each of these little squares represents 1. Or this represents 1 because each of these little squares represents 100th. One other thing to think about regarding place value is it's a great way to think about concrete, representational, and abstract. Thinking about how we can represent the same values in different ways with our place value blocks, with a model of those blocks or a number line model representation, or abstractly with the numerals. Last thing I want to point out before we wrap up this math mini. This unit has 29 days. But if you look in expressions or in vision, there are far less than 29 lessons aligned to this content. Because of that, when you look at your pacing guide, you will see that there are a lot of days where there's no envision or expressions lesson. I know that can be frustrating because it feels like it's an added barrier for you. But truly, the intention is that we're trying to help out by acknowledging that these resources don't have enough stuff. They don't have enough to help you. So we've added in days with other resources you can use to try to meet your students' needs. Of course, you also have those additional resources like games and small group instruction to use during inclusive student activities. And hopefully that will be helpful as you work toward developing place value understanding in your students in 4th grade, Unit 3.